We've just heard from IBM there of the scale and the nature of the threat. So, look, Eoin, I'll begin with you. What are the latest threats? What do we need to be worried about?
The problem with web security, it's been a problem for 20 years, 30 years. Some of the vulnerabilities still being used against large organizations. Some of the huge breaches aren't new. Ronan mentioned the fine for British Airways, for example. That was a result of code being rewritten by a group called MageCart. It wasn't particularly sexy or complex, but it was elegant. I personally think the challenge is scale. The challenge is security traditionally hasn't kept pace with system development and cloud deployment. What I'm trying to say is that we're developing systems in a much quicker way now. We have agile ways of developing code. We have ways of deploying thousands of systems into the cloud in minutes and tearing them down again, depending on how busy we are. I think one of the key challenges is just being able to keep pace with that, being able to keep pace with new code being deployed on your web applications on an hourly, daily, weekly basis. And also then, with volume, you're going to get a lot of noise. And so accuracy is a really, really hard challenge because the volume is increasing.
And therein lies the challenge because whereas previously we had human actors having to take a role, now it's not so much the humans as an artificial intelligence that might be snooping around for a way in that alerts a human.
I think that may happen more and more in the future. I think a lot of the attacks we're seeing now are still reasonably non-complex. But I think there is a trend, and things move very quickly in our industry. So I think in a matter of maybe a couple of years, you will have weaponized AI. But narrow AI, which is what we have now, we don't have general AI, we don't have broad AI, we have nothing like something from an Asimov book or iRobot. We don't have that, and we're quite a distance away from that. But
can I ask you, let me phrase the question another way.
Sure.
Is it more likely that the bad guys are going to weaponize AI before the good guys have AI ready to prevent them?
The bad guys can move quicker. So possibly, yeah. The bad guys have the motivation to move quicker. And if you can build even machine learning-based systems, which are possibly more, I think, there's a higher probability of them being developed first, but in an effective way. But I think the bad guys building that, because some of the vulnerabilities out there are so bloody simple. To be able to attack those systems across the entire internet at mass quickly and actually achieve their goal, I think that's certainly a possibility. Yeah.
Kevin, to talk about you, the development of the cloud, it's fantastic. Everything is stored away. We don't have to worry about servers on site. It's literally in a foreign place, quite literally in some cases, in a foreign place. Is it a good or a bad thing for security when you are effectively sending all of that valuable data belonging to your customers or yourself off on a wing and a prayer?
Yeah, so I think in the long term, it's a fantastic positive because we can re-architect applications from the beginning, how they're developed, how they're deployed, how they're architected foundationally to be more secure and to have security built in. So that is a long-term benefit. The short term, though, is more problematic. The attack surface is fundamentally different. Most people don't understand it. The cloud is kind of like an operating system. It is an operating system. It's certainly as complex. This is like we were with Windows 95, 10 years of pain that will be ahead as we learn what the attacks are. The good news is...
Hang on a second. The Windows 95 was the most vulnerable operating system of all time. Are you telling us that it's going to get a lot worse before we get a handle on it?
I think so. I mean, so I think Capital One and the AWS situation there will prove to be one of the things that we look back and say, we've already seen companies begin slowing their plans to move to the cloud as a result. It will happen. There's tons of business value, but we have to get better at defending. And Eoin's right. The vulnerabilities still are trivial to get in. The question is, once someone has gotten in, whether it's through a compromise, an endpoint, a phishing attack, how do you find them and stop them faster? The attackers have tools. They have automation. Those tools will move to cloud-based tools. So we need to get better and faster. And what
Is
we
it
do have,
going to be harder to find them? I mean, 19 minutes is kind of terrifying. If they're sitting around working in the computer in the background, you don't even realize they're there, and all of a sudden they're in. Is the fact that that cloud vulnerability is there going to make the job of cybersecurity experts all that more difficult?
It's already an extremely difficult job, and there are not enough people trained to do this. That's why to monitor at scale, you do need AI. And while there is not a generalized AI, we don't really need a generalized AI. We need a specialized AI that's focused on security. I mean, Google Translate is a specialized AI. It does its job very, very well. We need that for cybersecurity if we're going to keep up with the networks and the scale that we have to monitor and watch.
Okay.
And it's not 19 minutes. That's 19 minutes to make one move. If you look at a breach like Equifax, it's 63 days or 93 days. There are a lot of steps from initial compromise to success that have to happen. It turns the typical defender's dilemma on its head, where we as defenders have to be right every time. The attacker has to be right once. In a detect and respond mindset, the attacker has to be right every time through those 63 days in order to achieve their objective. We have to be right once.
Donna, if we can talk to you, we were talking earlier on about the prison service, your job is keep prisoners, bad guys, in, right? But they will try to get in, for the first time ever, into a prison via cybersecurity and potential, because the information you hold information on prisoners, transfers, prison officers, very valuable data if it fell into the wrong hands. So like the lack of a physical border, the lack that it's not the server that's sitting in HQ, it is somewhere on the cloud, that must terrify the living daylights out of a big organization like yours.
That does terrify the living daylights because you're worried about the integrity and the confidentiality of the data. And if it's in a cloud, it might have multi-tenants on that cloud. If it fails, where does it fail over to? You've got the jurisdictional issues. If it fails, I would like there to be a cable or a plug that I can just cut, and then it's that physical border, the physical infrastructure.
Like in prison, there's a lockdown. The alarm goes, the cell's shut, and everything's fine.
Exactly.
You don't have the equivalent in cyberspace.
No, and then you're running around worried about where's the data, what data has been lost, the impact of that. You have your breach notification requirement, which was mentioned earlier, the 72 hours. And so your governance frameworks, your organizational structures, your security testing, it's of huge importance and an impact on resources.
To be fair to the public service, and I think it's not unique to Ireland, a little bit slower in kind of moving in digital transformation?
Yes, the Irish Prison Service launched their strategic plan, their 3-year strategic plan last week, and one of the actions under the safe and secure custody is putting in place a modern, more technology-driven prison estate, which will facilitate a faster and more expedient service. And the service of the prison service is in the same way that society's evolved and has developed, and there is a need for digital transformation. There's a need to respond to digital transformation as well. There was the story a couple of weeks ago about the drone that delivered diabetes medicine to one of the islands, and how wonderful this is. But we're worried about drone incursions over prisons and scoping out, a proof of concept and a system that you can install antenna that will allow you to take over a drone that comes in over a prison and send it on its merry way.
Hollywood gives us a lot of examples on how you can kind of, work these things. Mission Impossible did this, right? They had Tom Cruise, whatever his character's name, was in prison in Russia, and there was the guy outside with the van, and he opened all the doors and all the gates. Now, I don't know how sophisticated Irish prisons are, and I don't expect you to tell me, but there is no level at which this is capped in terms of vulnerability.
We're depending on budget, resources, you're relying on legacy systems, you're also reliant on the systems that the other stakeholders are using, the guards, the judiciary, so it's
And look, that brings us to the wider area, Mille. Industrial security, making sure big infrastructure projects are safe. And we know that there has been success here in the past whereby nation-state attacks can result in infrastructure being interfered with. But it's not nation-state attacks you always have to be worried about. You have to be worried about the weakest link in the chain, which could be an individual. How do you go and prepare power grids, gas supply? How do you protect them from potential damage?
Yeah, so definitely it's, I wouldn't say it's wider necessarily. It's not a wider question as much as it's something that is definitely super important, but rather unique if you think of the cyberspace. It's about protecting the actual world, the actual physical world, as opposed to protecting data. And we talk about industrial control systems as a whole, and you see them in the grid, you see them in manufacturing, you see them in prisons and what's called building management systems. And that's a very, very different problem. Okay, and then definitely I'm here to speak a little bit about that, to shed a little bit of light on what that is and how it looks like. And I think that what's mainly interesting there is that things like cloud connectivity, things like encryption, authentication, AI, stuff that are considered to be basic or at least a buzzword that are very, very common in the IT space, they just don't exist within industrial control systems. So you've talked about nation-state attacks. Definitely, you might need to have like a nation-state type of motivation, but surprisingly enough, it's much easier than attacking a data center, right? It might be mind-blowing, but actually, if you understand cybersecurity, accessing an industrial control system, a controller, a PLC, a SCADA system, way, way easier than accessing a Windows box.
And this comes back to the point that was made earlier, that this wasn't a challenge 15 years ago. The same people are probably in charge now than were 15 years ago. Do they necessarily understand the nature of the threat?
So I think it's the two reasons. One of them is connectivity. I think that industrial control systems got connected to networks, speaking about digitalization, and for all the right reasons. If you're manufacturing, I don't know, some sort of a beverage and you're the CEO of a global company, you want to know what's the yield. You want to know how good you are in
but we've fallen in love with data. We want every single scrap of it so we know exactly what is happening at every single moment in time.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that we like we like that things are convenient. So you might actually operate a water utility remotely from your home, which is fair and happens in the real world. But yet again, it opens a huge gap
opportunity,
for security.
as some might say.
Well, yeah, it depends how you look at it.
Eoin, for you, Laya Healthcare, obviously a huge healthcare company holding very sensitive data on all of the people that you need to look after. Those people want to log in. They want to have access. You've got staff probably working remotely. You've got staff working across multiple sites. It would have been much easier when everything was written down on paper and stored in a file in a filing cabinet, but that's not how we work in 2019. So how have you been addressing the challenge?
Sure, I suppose we're like every business, the digital drive is just all encompassing, so people want to be able to claim, they want to be able to just take a picture on their phone, submit it and get it paid tomorrow. That's the consumer demand, and that's what we have to meet. What, for me, and it was very interesting listening to the other panelists, like when Kevin said, like, we need to get it right on a continuous basis, but we do have time. So for me, it's the challenge is always, we've got people, we've got process, and we've got technology. It's the same as we all probably learned in the first year when we were being trained on IT. And if we forget about things like governance, do we know what equipment is on our networks? Do we know who's using it? Do we know who's got privileged accounts on our systems? Do we monitor that continuously? So if somebody suddenly becomes a domain administrator on your network, do you know about it? You should know about it instantly, because now somebody's just got access at a privilege level that's very high. That's actually quite straightforward to do. If we get focused too much on the technology, I'm looking at buying a new system, it's wonderful, it does this, that, and the other, but I'm not maintaining the kind of the day-to-day, the basics. I'm actually, running the risk of falling, down the rabbit hole. So for me, it's always those three things together. It's the people and processes that we watch really, really carefully.
And I want to ask the same question of everyone on the panel before we open to questions from the floor. Like the idea that there are so many more access points now across the system, that you could have one of your very good data administrators in the field, gets an email, it looks like it should be something else, they half look at it because we're human, and accidentally give away key information.
Yeah.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility. I'm not saying that anyone would do that, but how do you prepare for the increased angle of attack from criminals? And it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, you need to review it constantly, and it's funny. We had one recently with our CEO, and we implemented a new system of positive identification of everyone who rang the service desk. And essentially, I've like a lot of us, I've very much a multinational kind of team. So if you get any Europeans on your team, they tend to take things very black and white. So the CEO rang one of the team, and he happened to be a German person, and he basically, if he didn't give him the information that he was required to give, this person was not making the change.
How did he take that?
He actually took it really well. He thought it was very funny. And he went off and found the information he needed, and then he got the service that he had to get. But you have to constantly look and say, okay, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe our business, we knew everyone who was in it. There wasn't the churn, the movement of team, staff in and out, that we could, when somebody rang, you knew who it was, you knew their voice. Now, as you say, we've got people who work from home, who work remotely. You don't know them as well. You have to have processes that capture and manage that.
Donna, how do you deal with that increased angle of attack from everyone working in the prison service? And I mean, you've got your experience with the DPC previously. How do we prepare for that explosion in access?
Again, as you said, it comes down to the people, processes and systems, and in particular your governance framework around not just your IT governance framework, but the governance around the processes and the people to ensure you have the accessibility, to ensure there's a culture that the people know that they're expected to positively identify themselves, to bring forth any of the issues or risks or vulnerabilities that are happening out there. And just it's building up a culture, I think, as well, so that, as you said, the CEO found it quite funny and he reacted okay, but that it's okay to be.
Mille, we know the infamous story of the casino that was hacked via the fish tank, and all that follows from that. For big organizations, for big, complex organizations, where it can be still relatively straightforward to access key controls like in infrastructure, how do you deal with that increased angle of attack?
So I'd say that throughout the last 5 years, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. Again, I'm well familiar with this specific vertical of critical infrastructure, building management systems, and so on. It's about education. It's about technology vendors and about processes and about I guess it's hard to sort of put the finger on what exactly drove it, but I think that nowadays it gets clear that you need to have some sort of a technology in place. 3-4 years ago, speaking about people, processes, and technology, I've been in conversations with CISOs of large organizations saying, well, yeah, I cannot yet implement your technologies, Indegy's technology, because I don't yet have the people in place. And when I've asked them, well, when are you planning to recruit these people? They said, well, I can't just recruit them because they won't have anything to do. I don't have the technology in place and so on. And we've, it might sound funny, but we've heard that quite a few times. I think that nowadays there's, everyone understands what cybersecurity is. Everyone understands that it's needed, specifically in industrial control systems. So things are just taking place, speeding up.
And on that point, everybody's aware of this. Are they willing to invest in it properly yet? I mean, is there always still a bit of resistance when they see a price tag coming in, go, not paying that?
So let's sort of wind it back a bit. Let's say we need to make sure things are secure. How do we do that? We need to know they exist. So we need visibility. Ways of achieving visibility can be very, very cheap. There are open source solutions out there. It's something which, funnily enough, has been around for, again, a long, long time, but in the last 5 or 6 years, there are many companies getting involved in this sort of visibility attack surface space. It doesn't really have to be prohibitively expensive, but you are surprised. So we work a lot in the PSD2 space for financials, and a lot of organizations in the banking industry are deploying lots and lots of APIs for open banking. And a lot of them, particularly global financial organizations, they don't even know where the APIs are, what they do, and how many are exposed. So it's sort of like there's a rush, like the Facebook word of, sort of the way they say is move fast and break stuff. And to be honest, that's causing problems in my view. Call me old-fashioned. But it's very much around, there's a large sort of component of many industry verticals which just are sort of reversing, backing up the truck, if you will, and they're actually trying to figure out, well, what do we have deployed? Because if we don't know what we have deployed on the cloud, on premise, internally, externally, we actually don't even, we can't even attempt to start to secure all this stuff.
I'm going to go to questions on the floor, and Kevin, I'm going to put this one to you because it's on that theme. Somebody says, we all know that we need cybersecurity. Why are so many organizations not willing to hire highly experienced cybersecurity staff?
That's a fantastic question. I think it is well known. The cybersecurity gap is well known. I think one of the things that is a consistent theme, there's a people processes component, and there's a tooling component. The people and the processes are absolutely critical. I think one of the ways that we all need to get better is in making the business case to the business and the funders. And a lot of that comes down to, can you understand where the key threats to your business are? Where is the data? Where is the thing that's going to take you out? And then test. Okay, let's start with the CEO and try to get there with a deepfake or a phishing or however the path in is. And then have an adversarial approach where the red team, a good red team, tries to get to what you care about. Figure out how good your people, your processes, your tools are. A lot of times it's going to be people. That makes your case for how you hire, why you need to hire. And then I think there's also just a large gap that we need to fill in terms of where the people are to hire. This was something that I know Eoin was talking about.
It's a huge challenge, Ian. And again, we are in a town that has got a bit of a niche for cybersecurity at the moment, which means that we are probably around 100% employment, which means that if you go looking, they're not necessarily going to be available on tap. And the question's on the screen from Simon Woodworth. Hello, Simon, wherever you may be. What sort of college graduates are you looking for? What do we need to start producing right now?
I would say in some areas, like if you talk about somebody who's going to be a SOC analyst, who's very, very deep technical resource like that, that's going to be somebody who's done their computer science, their networking, they're in that sort of space. But a lot of the governance, a lot of the process type work is your core IT skills. IT people by their nature, we're very structured. We see things very logically and sequentially. We're that kind of folk. And a lot of the graduates who can come in from the BIS courses, like the BIS courses here in Cork. They're both fantastic courses. And I would take a graduate like that for any number of roles, including into cyber. And if they want to graduate towards that deep technical SOC, there are ways, there are avenues for them to do that. So it's I suppose I work on the base that you get the right people and you give them the exposure, you give them the training, and they'll do fantastically well.
Look, there's lots of questions coming in. I know you guys will be mingling as well in a little while, but I'm just going to take one more from the screen. Donna, I'm going to put this one to you. What about women in cyber? Why is it so frustratingly male-dominated? How can we attract diversity? I mean, you've worked your career through in this space, but is there still a bit of a challenge, and does that also give rise to a new challenge?
There absolutely is a challenge, and where I've just come from in terms of the technologists in cyber, they were all male. Where I am now, the IT team is male. But I think certainly coming to these events and having networked at several other events, there are more and more women in it, and I think the perspective from a woman being very logical as well, can bring a good dynamic to the team, like, very logical and organized. And I mean, look at this manel/panel here.
Well, look, it's here, and I suppose it is changing, but it's taken a little bit longer than people would like. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause for our panel of Eoin Brennan, Donna Creaven, Mille Gandelsman, Eoin Keary, and Kevin Kennedy.